You look strong on the outside, but on the inside you're falling apart. There are people who age over time. And there are people who grow old with experiences. If you've been through too much, you know what I'm talking about. It's not just physical fatigue, it's that emotional exhaustion that seems to live in your chest, as if life had demanded from you a strength that no one taught you how to build. Perhaps you have developed an almost automatic psychological resilience. You learned to endure, to hold on, to move forward even when the world seemed to collapse. But what almost no one talks about is that this strength is often born from an emotional trauma, from an overload of the nervous system, from a maturity that came too soon and was costly. There is a psychology of those who have faced losses, disappointments, early responsibilities, and silences that hurt more than screams. People like this often carry hypervigilance, constant emotional self-protection, and at the same time a deep empathy that seems almost intuitive. It is as if they feel the world with invisible antennas. But here's the part that maybe no one told you: what almost broke you can also turn into post-trauma growth. Pain can turn into clarity. The fall can become consciousness. And the strength you have built out of necessity can finally become choice. Throughout this content, I will show you how to understand this psychological adaptation, how to transform your emotional independence into balance and not isolation, and how to integrate this emotional duality of feeling intensely and protecting yourself at the same time. Because maybe you're not broke. Maybe you're just tired of being too strong. There is a type of fall that no one sees. Silent emotional breakdown has no audience, no dramatic announcement. It happens inside, while you keep functioning. Emotional exhaustion accumulates like small cracks in the wall. Nothing seems serious in isolation, but one day everything gives way. And the most curious? You still keep saying that it's okay. This breakdown usually comes after long periods of overloading the nervous system. The mind goes into survival mode, trying to keep emotional self-protection active at all times. This is where hypervigilance arises, that need to predict every detail to avoid new scams. But living like this is like leaving the alarm on 24 hours inside your own body. Many people confuse this with weakness, but in fact it is the consequence of an intense psychological adaptation to difficult situations. The body and mind did what they could to survive the emotional trauma. The problem is that surviving is not the same as living. And when you notice this difference, something bigger begins to emerge: a real possibility of psychological resilience that goes far beyond just putting up with it. After the silent emotional breakdown, many people don't explode. They are silent. A false calm arises that looks like balance, but is actually numbness. Emotional exhaustion reaches such a high point that the system simply reduces the volume of emotions. It doesn't hurt as much, but it doesn't vibrate as much either. This numbness is a sophisticated form of emotional self-protection. The brain understands that feeling intensely has already cost too much, so it activates a kind of economic mode. It is a psychological adaptation strategy after repeated episodes of emotional trauma. The problem is that, along with the pain, enthusiasm and lightness often go away. Here comes a dangerous trap: confusing indifference with emotional independence. Not needing anyone is different from not being able to connect. The emotional duality begins to intensify: on the outside stability, on the inside a void that is difficult to explain. And while hypervigilance remains active, the body continues to deal with the overload of the nervous system, even when everything seems calm. At some point, you realize that you had no option but to stay strong. Psychological resilience was not born from a pretty self-help book. It emerged as a survival mechanism. When emotional trauma repeats itself, the mind learns to endure, reorganize, and carry on. And this creates an internal structure that many people admire, but few understand. But there is a difference between conscious resilience and automatic resistance. The former generates post-trauma growth, the latter keeps the nervous system overload active, as if the danger were still present. Hypersurveillance continues to operate behind the scenes, analyzing everything, anticipating everything. It's as if life was always a surprise test. Harris, the crux: true resilience includes pause, not just performance. Developing emotional independence does not mean carrying the world alone, but choosing when and with whom to share the burden. The psychological adaptation that once served to survive can now be refined to live with more balance. And that brings us to something even deeper: the maturity that is born of pain. There are people who have not had prolonged emotional childhood. Forced maturity came early, pushed by responsibilities that did not match her age. When emotional trauma kicks in too soon, the mind accelerates processes that should be gradual. And the result is usually someone too strong for their own good. This maturity creates an impressive emotional independence. You learn to solve, decide, and sustain situations under pressure. But behind this, there is often accumulated emotional exhaustion and constant hypervigilance. It is as if the body has never been allowed to fully relax. The powerful side of this experience is that it can generate deep psychological resilience and even post-trauma growth. However, when emotional self-protection becomes the absolute rule, the connection is limited. The psychological adaptation that was once a defense begins to ask for updating. And that's precisely where the nervous system enters the next phase of this story. After a long time under pressure, something changes inside. Overloading the nervous system is no longer the exception and becomes the standard. The body starts to operate in a constant state of alert, even when there is no real danger. And this continuous hypervigilance drains energy silently. What many people don't realize is that this is a form of psychological adaptation to prolonged stress. The brain learned that it needed to be ready all the time because of the emotional trauma it experienced. But when the environment changes and the danger is no longer the same, the system continues to react as if it were at war. And this feeds emotional exhaustion. The good news? The nervous system can also be re-educated. Simple practices such as mindful breathing, moderate physical exercise, and even reading on emotional regulation help rebuild psychological resilience in a healthy way. This process strengthens emotional independence without reinforcing excessive self-protection. And as the body learns to relax, there is room to notice something even more subtle: how the mind begins to anticipate everything before it even happens. When you've been through too much, your mind learns to play chess with life. Hypervigilance becomes automatic. You analyze tones of voice, expressions, silences. It's not paranoia, it's psychological adaptation shaped by experiences of emotional trauma. The problem is that predicting everything is also tiring. And a lot. This constant anticipation keeps the nervous system overload active. Even on quiet days, the body remains alert, as if something could go wrong at any moment. This is where part of the emotional exhaustion that no one understands is born. After all, on the outside you only seem attentive. Inside, he is always preparing for impact. But here there is a powerful turning point. When you recognize hypervigilance, you can turn it into conscious awareness, a more balanced form of psychological resilience. Instead of reacting automatically, you get to choose your answers. And in this space between stimulus and reaction, something even deeper develops. An emotional sensitivity that few can access. Those who have experienced real pain often develop a deep, almost instinctive empathy. You notice subtle changes in people's eyes, you understand silences, you capture what was not said. This is born out of the emotional trauma itself, which has expanded your perception. It is a sensibility that is not learned in courses, it is lived. But there is a trap here. When hypervigilance mixes with empathy, you can start absorbing other people's emotions as if they were your own. The overload of the nervous system increases, and emotional exhaustion reappears disguised as constant concern for others. The line between care and self-abandonment becomes dangerously thin. The secret lies in balancing this empathy with conscious emotional self-protection. Developing emotional independence doesn't mean ceasing to care, but learning to set healthy boundaries. When this emotional maturity is consolidated, psychological resilience ceases to be just survival and begins to transform into practical wisdom. And this leads us to a delicate point: the fatigue of those who have always been the strong point of history. There is a specific type of emotional exhaustion that affects those who have always been the pillar of the family, the group, the relationship. You became a reference of strength so early that you didn't even notice when you started to be silent about your own pain. Forced maturity has taught you to solve everything, but not necessarily to ask for help. And that weighs, even if no one sees it. Being the strong one in the story often means keeping emotional self-protection active at all times. You sustain others while dealing with your own nervous system overload in silence. Hypervigilance keeps working, anticipating problems before they arrive. But even the most resilient of systems needs a break. The turning point happens when you understand that psychological resilience is not about enduring endlessly, it is knowing how to recalibrate. Developing true emotional independence includes recognizing boundaries without guilt. This awareness makes room for a new type of psychological adaptation, more balanced and less reactive. And it is precisely from this adjustment that a new form of protection is born. More strategic and less rigid. After so many intense experiences, emotional independence is no longer a choice and becomes a strategy. You learn not to depend on validation, to solve it yourself, not to create expectations too high. It sounds like strength, and often it is. But it can also be a sophisticated form of emotional self-protection. When emotional trauma teaches that trusting can hurt, the mind activates a new psychological adaptation: I am enough. This reduces risk, decreases disappointment, and keeps hypervigilance running in the background. But this extreme self-sufficiency can fuel emotional exhaustion, because carrying everything alone is tiring even the most resilient. The point of balance is in transforming independence into choice, not armor. True psychological resilience includes knowing when to make room for support, without feeling like it threatens your strength. When the overload of the nervous system decreases, you realize that sharing responsibilities does not weaken, it strengthens. And it is in this paradox that the next layer of this journey arises: emotional duality. There is an emotional duality very present in those who have been through too much. You feel everything intensely: joy, fear, love, frustration, but at the same time, you activate emotional self-protection almost instantly. It's like accelerating and braking at the same time. And this, of course, generates emotional exhaustion. This dynamic is born from the combination of deep empathy and experiences of emotional trauma. Your system has learned that feeling is powerful, but it can also be dangerous. Then hypervigilance comes into play, analyzing every detail before you give yourself away. The overload of the nervous system increases because the body never fully relaxes. Maturation happens when you realize that this duality doesn't have to be conflict, it can be balance. Psychological resilience allows you to feel without destroying yourself, and emotional independence helps you choose where to invest energy. This new psychological adaptation makes room for something inevitable: mourning for the old versions of oneself that have fallen by the wayside. Few people talk about it, but growing through pain implies losing old versions of yourself. There is a silent mourning for who you were before the emotional trauma, before forced maturity, before constant hypervigilance. Sometimes there is that longing for a lightness that seems distant. And this longing is also part of the journey. This grief can intensify emotional exhaustion, because it's not just about what happened, it's about who you stopped being. Psychological adaptation built a new, stronger, and more strategic identity. But the emotional duality appears again: pride in one's own psychological resilience and, at the same time, sadness for invisible losses. When you allow yourself to feel this grief without judging yourself, something powerful happens. Emotional self-protection begins to become more flexible, and emotional independence ceases to be isolation and becomes a conscious choice. The overload on the nervous system decreases when you accept that you didn't have to be so strong all along. And it is exactly from this acceptance that the last transformation is born. When pain ceases to be just survival and becomes understanding, true post-trauma growth is born. You begin to see patterns, to understand your reactions, to realize how psychological adaptation has shaped your story. Psychological resilience is no longer automatic and becomes conscious. And this completely changes the way you position yourself in the world. Emotional exhaustion no longer dominates as it used to, because you learn to respect your limits. Hypervigilance turns into strategic perception, not constant tension. Emotional self-protection becomes discernment, not a wall. And the old overload of the nervous system begins to give way to a more stable and secure presence. The most beautiful thing is that his deep empathy is maintained, but now accompanied by balanced emotional independence. Emotional duality integrates: you feel intensely, but you choose consciously. Forced maturity becomes practical wisdom, that which does not need to be announced, only lived. And it is from this silent force that the decision to live is born, not only resistant, but fully awake. If you've come this far, you may have recognized yourself in several of these points. Emotional exhaustion, hypervigilance, forced maturity, the feeling of always having been too strong. All of this has shaped who you are. But now I ask you, do you want to just keep surviving, or are you ready to turn this psychological adaptation into conscious evolution? Their psychological resilience has already been proven. What is lacking is not strength, it is direction. How can you reduce nervous system overload in your daily life? Where is your emotional self-protection becoming a barrier instead of protection? And how can your deep empathy exist without you abandoning yourself in the process? True post-trauma growth begins when you decide to live with intention. When emotional independence ceases to be isolation and becomes a mature choice. When emotional duality ceases to be conflict and becomes balance. Small daily actions, setting boundaries, taking conscious breaks, seeking knowledge, perhaps even professional support, begin this transformation. Now the most important question: what will be your next step? If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we transform pain into clarity, and experience into conscious strength.